Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode.
In today's conversation, you will hear the S-curves from Srinivasan Sundararajan, my very dear friend for the last 10 years and my colleague from PM Power Consulting. His career spans over multiple decades and across geographies. You will hear the way in which he not only transcends decades but also talks about his failures of taking an S-curve and what he had not prepared for himself. Some of the things that he also constantly gives is a very good framework and thought processes in how you have to think about when you go into a next level. He covers around why, what is the intention of taking a next level and creating an effort for it and giving some time for that to materialize and having understanding of the risk or the bet that one is taking. And most importantly, Srinivasan covers the availability or need for a mentor or a coach whenever we take a next S-curve. And also one of the things that you will hear from Srinivasan is how each and every step of his is built on top of it. I think one of the things that I have a distinct conversation and honor to have had this conversation. I hope you will enjoy this podcast. And a short introduction, Srinivasan Sundararajan is an alumni of IIT Madras. He's been a director for HP for almost more than 10 years. And he's an author, co-author along for books on enterprise agility and has coached several organizations, has also been an advisory in many firms. Listen on.
Welcome to the special edition of Software People Stories, Srini. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you.
Hey, thanks, Gayatri. It's been a while since I spoke to you. Nice catching up with you.
Yes, absolutely. This series is a special edition of S-curves. S-curves is a way of model in which we are jumping to our next level of existence. It's all about growth and change. So today I'm inviting Srinivasan Sundararajan to talk about his S-curves, both personal as well as professional S-curves and his learnings from there. Thank you, Srini, for laying it bare for all of us to understand.
Hey, thanks, Gayatri. First of all, congratulations. Incredible. When I first heard you guys started, I thought it was an experiment, and now it is running. Right, that's an accomplishment by itself. So let me jump straight into the question you asked, S-curves, right? S-curves are, as I said, happen both in personal life and in professional life. And today, in hindsight, I would not even distinguish them. I would just look at S-curves as part of my life, right? Because my professional life is in some senses defining my personal needs, right? Everything probably is a personal need. That's how I look at it. And the word S-curve, right? I probably realized it much later in life, right? It's over the last 10 years, I think I have been using this word. Prior to that, I don't think I ever used this word S-curve, at least in my professional. I mean, as an engineering student, yes, there was an S-curve, but never understood that it applied to you as an individual, right? So whatever I talk of as S-curves are now saying, hey, does it fit the concept, right? Because at that time, I don't think I called it S-curve.
Agree. For me also, I understood S-curve only the last 10, 12 years, Srini. The two, it has, then it's like an aha moment, right? Oh, wow, this is what it is.
I think I started off, right from the word go, right? I don't know. I'll probably start talking of right from my first job, so to speak, right? Or where I started to build a career. I think that itself was an S-curve. Yeah, had an opportunity to graduate from IIT, which by itself was good, but graduated those days in mechanical engineering and decided to jump into the IT industry. And I'm talking of an era where there were less than 5,000 people in this country, not when there are 5 million people as they are today, right? That was the first big leap of faith from what I graduated to what I jumped in. It was successful. The next thing was once I worked in Godrej and actually made through with it, I quickly realized that I'm happy with what I am doing, but there was a bigger itch. I did go ahead and do a postgraduate course, certificate course on NCST. All of that only added more to the fact that, hey, being a part of CIO's organization, am I actually capping off my ability to grow? Given that my peers were as good as me, right? Even if not better than me. And there were seniors to me already there. That's when I said, hey, the first thing is I have to be willing to jump out of this comfort and get into a place where technology may be the core of the company. So that's how I joined the Citigroup. Citigroup had opened up a software unit in Bombay. And that was a big leap of faith. So started as a mechanical engineering. I thought I will be in a mechanical engineering company. So if I don't succeed, I always have a fallback. Now I have removed that and have pushed myself to a company where I think software is the core of it. So that was the first big jump. And technology changed from this company to the other one. I should thank my managers, whoever at that era, right? Quite a few of them. They were all instrumental in sort of trusting my ability to make the change. Succeeded and made the big difference. And it also opened my international exposure. I had not even flown on a domestic aircraft, live apart internationally, right? When on a Friday evening, my bosses called me up and said, pack your bags and get ready to fly out. So much for how things change, right? So the S-curve meant many things to me. It was on the professional side. It also meant now culturally, I had to work with people in different countries. And on top of it, one of my earliest stints in Switzerland, my boss said I had just got trained on IBM mainframe on a different type of environment. And he said, hey, you can go to this customer. I have positioned you as a consultant. I said, look, I don't know. And you're putting me right in front of the customer. He said, go, you will do it. Right? I think S-curve to me was a great moment then, right? Because it was a big breakthrough in personal life, right? Going there actually in an alien culture, not knowing the underlying tools and technology, and actually finishing my work faster than what they expected at about 35% of the time that they actually estimated was a big S-curve. So what I learned in this whole process is you have to have faith in yourself, and hopefully you are in an environment where your leaders trust you. If your leaders trust you, right, that comfort in the back of my mind probably is what propelled all my S-curves, early S-curves.
I think that you called it very clearly in terms of having a mentor or a sponsor initial phase of our life, right? When you have that sort of a belief that you can create, that makes you wings in your world, right? I think that's very, very cool in terms of building that initial career, in terms of client facing and leaving our fear of going to an alien country. I can imagine that. That's fantastic, Shini. Later on in your career, what are the next S curves that you can imagine that you've done?
I will take off from where you left, Gayatri. Having a mentor or having even a manager or a leader trusting you. And I'm going to share now with you probably my first failed S-curve, if I were to word it, right? I mean, there's nothing like a failure, but generally, I mean, a failure from the viewpoint that in your mind, you anticipated something and it didn't happen. So goes back to my early 90s, when the Indian industry, software industry was still very nascent. And I had joined this organization and I had already leapfrogged to managing a team of 40 people, which, if you go back in time, was a big thing, right? And I was all gung-ho now, right? I could do anything, is my view. And then my managing director called me up and said, hey, here is an opportunity. We go to Australia, start this, and we are looking at getting back the work to India, and that will be in a team of about 140, 150 people. I can tell you, after I came home a couple of days later, I said 140, 150 at that era was bigger than many companies in the software industry.
Absolutely.
Right. So, I mean, I was absolutely thrilled that my managing director trusted me to do it. I signed up for it. And after he initiated the discussion with the other party in Australia, he came back and said, Srini, I have a little bit of a challenge coming your way. He said, for them to trust us, they want you and the team to actually go in as boot campers. They're not going to allow you to take over this retail banking product to India without you starting as a boot camper. Just imagine, I was running a team of 40, I was a project lead, and they wanted me to come back and play the role of a campus grad, so to speak, because they said I'll have to go to the training, which I can understand of the product, and then start from there and prove. The way my manager backed me up for the opportunity, right? I said, I will go and make it. I huddled the team up, went there, confident that we can prove that we are more than worthy of it. So I started off as a boot camper. 3 months later, they gave me what they would give a typical training. And then the manager there said, hey, I'm good enough to actually be like a senior programmer. Another 3 months after that, he said, hey, you can actually analyze and design. I think you're good enough. And so I had to climb my way back. And in my viewpoint, my goal was simple, right? Because my managing director had told me that here's an opportunity to come back and run 140 people team back in India. So I said, okay, I'm going through it. And I was telling him back what was happening. And then all of a sudden, they made a decision that this organization there is not going to outsource this to India.
Oh my God.
I asked my team members, all of them were happy to continue there. So I continued to ask them to stay on in the project, right? If that's what they wanted. But that was not in line with my career plan. So here was a setback, right? But then I had actually become equivalent of what level I was there as a lead and a manager. Now I had to do a descent back, right? Because I had to hand it over because I said, no longer am I interested in staying on that program. I want to go ahead. And it took me another 6 months to wrap it up. And then I came back. The managing director had changed. And if that first one was a little bit of an unfortunate event, the second one, I will tell you, is a little bit more shocking for me, was shocking for me then. The managing director said, bad luck, man. You took this one, you went there to do it. And well, if it didn't materialize, that's your luck. So people who were there at my level or a little, and where I was performing, had moved ahead, right? And I said, look, I took this chance to go there because the earlier person in this chair promised me something, right? He backed me up. And you are now trying to back out, right? This is not fair. It's an organization that made a commitment and you got to honor it. I tried my best, but JP would not agree with it. He just said, you're bad luck. And yeah, so that I would say was an interesting situation then, because any time after that for the next several years in my life, when I would think of this man, my BP would shoot up. If ever a doctor had actually put a cuff around my arm, he would suddenly see from nowhere, he would see that I have gone way beyond the radar. Right? I just had to think of this guy. I was absolutely petrified. Okay, now this is what I want to share back with our viewers here. So taking an S curve, for me, at that time, I didn't think of it, jumping from managing 40 to 140 in a matter of 12, 18 months was the big thing I viewed. What I didn't realize is in the process, there can be a risk. And if that risk materializes, your S curve, instead of, this was where I was, and this is how the S curve was, I dropped low, I came back. But what happened, because of the fact that there's a change in environment, the risk materialized and I dropped off. So in other words, it was an aborted S curve, and potentially I felt bad, I lost. So S curves also mean to me that you have to somewhere understand that failures can happen. I was not ready then. Several years later, I accepted it, right? I said, okay, I understand now what is risk, right? So yes, I only looked at the positive side. I only looked at all the people who backed me up. I never thought what if something went wrong, right? Could I actually have lost a few years and actually doodled around at the same level because I went down and just came back to that point. Very important to understand S curves can have failure. And needless to say, I decided to move on from that place.
Makes a
Right,
complete
because-
sense. I was going to ask you that, saying that did you move out? Because see, we always say this, right? Leadership values should not be based on one single person. It's a culture that you build in, and the what kind of a handovers that you're creating, documentation, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, but see, it is a very difficult thing, Gayatri. Today, in hindsight, if I was a lawyer, I could argue for either of the two parties. Yeah, you can say process and all that, but somebody will say, hey, here somebody else was there and I had the opportunity, I gave it away. Bad luck to you, right? You took this risk, the risk materialized. One way of arguing. The other way of saying is, hey, whoever was there in the chair made you a promise, so I am going to do something to help you back, come back, right? Because you did not take the decision by yourself, right? So yeah, I could argue either way today, but at that point of time, and we all heard the classical story, right? People work for managers, people leave managers, right? So if everything was only process and documentation, right, then that other statement will not be valid.
True. People will not leave managers. True, true, so true.
Or people will leave because of managers, right? So I think today I accept it, right? I am just saying, so if I were to look at it, hey, there is an element of chance, and that can go either way. So something I would tell people is, when you take a S curve, when you take a big leap of faith, be prepared that sometimes things will not go your way. I had my share of success. This one went wrong.
Yeah. Very well put, Srini. Actually, in fact, oftentimes we talk only from a positive standpoint, right? If when we are taking the term that you use, leap of faith, when you're taking a leap, there are inherent risks associated. When we actually run programs, we actually look at risks and weigh in and identify that. But sometimes we don't do that inherently, intentionally, when it comes to our own personal escapes. Wanted to touch base on, have you tried intentionally managing those risks when it came to any of your escapes, personal as well as professional? Being intentional about it, deliberate about it.
Yeah, being intentional and being deliberate about it, right? After that, I went through a couple of startups and there is a story, but I'll jump to what you asked. Actually, many times when you draw a two-dimensional thing, which is what we can draw, S-curves look on a single plane as if it looks like one follows the other. In real world, S-curves are different dimensions, right? So for me, the big change was at one stage after a couple of startups, a little bit of failure and things like that, was what was I looking for, right? While my heart was still saying go for another opportunity like that, right? So much so that I actually ran into a couple of people who were in a startup mode and were wanting me to join them, right? Looked attractive. And actually, one of them, very interestingly, was I had just started my investing. I mean, if you go back in the late 90s, mutual funds was just starting up and online equity investing was very new, right? So I had just started. And I ran into this investment banker. And he actually saw I was talking about my story, and he was wanting to check up whether I was interested in actually getting into the investment banking side for them to help up with startups. So now, two startups, some shut down, right? My heart was saying that, hey, I should probably pick this up. But then my mind said, look, ask yourself a question. Are you ready once more if it starts and you land up at the same place? I think I said, no, I don't think at this stage in life, because family, I had started a family. I had my kid, right? And soon enough, my second child was on the way. I said, hey, wait a minute, maybe not. So deliberately, sometimes you make a call, right? You analyze the risk there and you say, hey, it may not be worth it. Did not mean that I'm going to make a compromise on things. But then I decided to look for alternate ways to still have my passion running. So I decided to join a large company, well established. Yes, I did get a good role, right? People treated me with respect, and there were opportunities like a startup inside that, which came in later. But I think I mentally prepared myself, saying that that adrenaline pumping, which I was getting so many times, is not probably going to happen when I go here. And so it's a conscious call. When I de-risk, I lose something that excited me, but I said stability to run what I wanted was what I'm going to look for. I did get it. So yeah, consciously I made a call, right? Again, not using the word S-curve, but if you look at it, it had all the characteristic traits of that.
Very, very cool, Srini. I think, in fact, my next question was around that space of, pull versus push. You actually capsulated very clearly in terms of while you may be pulled towards more risky adventure, but at the same time, you always have to balance by your own innate experience of that every S-curve would not materialize with your own experience. And I think we oftentimes talk about risk in terms of being very positive. We took a risk and we materialize. I think it's also a matter of, ensuring that you can apply your passion in a balance. So I wanted to understand the pull versus push model. Many times I have had, for example, I myself joined PM Power Consulting way back 8-9 years back when I took my own leap to consulting. By to some extent, a pull from PM Power Consulting, the excitement of having that, and then also push from my own personal circumstances of having to do that balance of my personal life. I had to balance aspects of it. So I wanted to understand, has there been a flavor of pull versus push whenever you had to take that next S-curve?
Yeah, I think with passage of time, you definitely will see it. Is my viewpoint. Early on, you may or may not distinguish, but somewhere down the line, I think you get a little more clarity on these things, right? And let me share with you this situation. But part of it is, in my case, at least in this particular instance, was my mental preparation of where I wanted to go, right? So long back, I had told Priya that, hey, by 45, I want to retire. Like, everybody has this wonderful thing. Uh, uh, and when 45 came, well, I said, we are not ready for it yet. And I said, I'll move the goalpost by 5 more years, right? She was saying, perfectly fine, whatever it takes to this one, right? She was very supportive of that. Now, in my mind, I said, hey, that's the time frame at which I'm looking at sort of wrapping out on my corporate life, if I were to speak, right? So there was a mental preparation I had. Now, partly it was a pull and a push as I came towards the end of it, and I did make that call as soon as I hit my 50th birthday, incidentally. The very month I finished 50, I left the corporate world, right? So, like you, I also happened to get into PM Power Consulting just a little earlier than you came in. So there was this pull of the fact that, hey, I could be independent. And the most important thing was I said, now I am answerable only for what I do as an individual contributor. And I am not accountable for an army of 1,000 people or several thousands with whom you have to start figuring out what they do. So if you ask me, that was the pull. If you ask me, there is a push out, in the sense, in the classical world, I had sort of reached that point where things like, hey, wine and dine, the next customer comes in, wine and dine, convince them, right? Go back, hire people, fire people when you have to, coax and cajole people to stay back, right? Escalations come, convince one end, try to prep the other end to say, hey, you'll have to put in a little more to make this happen, right? It sort of became a very well-defined, I would say, life. And if I looked at all my career, that was not how it went till that point. I had different types of things I had enjoyed, right? It was probably my fortune, I would say, in hindsight. I always got a different thing to do every few years. Never stayed on the same thing. In hindsight, I should consider myself lucky. I should thank all the people who were there, my leaders who trusted me for that, right? It worked. So there was a push because the work was getting more or less similar, right? Growth, utilization, revenue per person, right? The usual things that happen in the service industry. I said, look, so there was this push out saying, this is not what I want to continue for another decade. At the same time, there was this calling on my side, right? A liberation from, so to speak, having to bother about thousands of people and their career to coming back to an individual. Yeah, you can have a push and pull. That S curve was very different. So if you talk of growth, very often growth is like, oh, I was an individual contributor. Now I have a small team to mentor. I have a large team by myself. I have a small product or an area to manage. I have a group, a set of customers, a domain. And suddenly I am trying to come back and say, I am become an individual contributor in life, which is where life began. So, but yet to me, that was an S curve because it was a change from what I wanted. I wanted to get away from this. So S curves can be different things for different people. It was not anymore about the monetary part, right? I knew I am not going to have a paycheck every month or at the end of the year, a bonus check. Pretty much done, right? But today it was more about, can I go back and use my capability and contribute back? That was the S curve I was looking for. And yeah, That's how life changes, I guess, as to what S-curve means. That's why I said S-curve is multidimensional. It doesn't mean the same thing all through my life.
Very, very well put, Srini. I love the fact that you actually almost brought in a circle in the curves itself. I know curves itself are more curves you make, you actually make it as a circle. That's the mathematician in me. But, I immensely enjoyed this S-curve conversation. Srini, any last piece of advice that you want to share with our listeners?
Okay. So when you look at S-curve, I think there are a few elements, right? I would like to say I synthesized out of all this. Number one, I think you have to have a clear thought of what is it that you want in the S-curve, right? That's the first thing, your thought or your passion around it. Second thing is you need to put your effort around it. Third thing, you also have to give it certain time for it to happen, right? It's not going to materialize in an instant. The fourth thing, risk is a very negative connotation for most people. I would say there is an element of chance. Accept that. While you will do everything possible, keep the view of that risk, as you said, in front of you. And accept that there is going to be a chance things can go differently. Right? That's the fourth element, I would say. The fifth thing that I would add is, in this journey, look forward to having whatever way you want it, a guru or a mentor or a coach, whoever, all right, whom you think you can bounce off and take it forward, right? It helps. So these are the 5 things I would tell people to look at.
Wow. Actually, it's pretty good framework to look in S-curves, follow your thoughts and have a clear idea, put effort into it, let the time pass. I mean, don't be, impatient about it, if I can rephrase, and understand what are the bets that you're taking or chances that you may not take, and then having a mentor. I understand all of these you actually mentioned in various parts of your story. Also, if I can connect back, Shane, this is a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time today, and I appreciate everything that you do. And you're also my guru, so I want to acknowledge that today, and thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri. It has been great, and wishing Software People Stories more success, right? You guys have done a fabulous job. Wishing you more years of success.
Thank you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.